What are some very comforting facts? Jupiter's gravitational mass is so immense, modern science believe it's been protecting us from meteors for millions of years. It's highly likely your pet dreams of you in their sleep. All of the cardigans Mr. Rogers wore on camera were knit by his mother. Goldfish can recognize their owners. Damn, he has been watching you this whole time and you didn't even know. Bees take naps in flowers. So yeah, it's okay to need a nap, even busy bees do. Scientists have discovered that rats love playing hide and seek and squeal with joy when finding/being found. In dog/wolf movies where they use real-life dog actors, the people who have to edit all that sometimes have to add CGI tails because they dogs can't stop wagging their tail as they are so happy. Cows have best friends. The word for penguin in Mandarin translates to business goose. What's the sad reality of being an adult that young people should know? No one else has time to look out for you. They're busy looking out for themselves. So, save money, eat healthy, get enough sleep. No one else is going to make sure you're doing those things. There are actual consequences for just doing whatever you want. Eating all the snacks is not a good idea. If you don't put yourself out there, you won't have friends. You don't have much free time and no one will take care of you. The health isn't thing you must take for granted. You should care about it. Life isn't full of endless possibilities. The older you get, the harder it becomes to choose different life paths, whether you like the path you're currently on or not. You're the person you used to look for when you needed help and you're never ready for that.
What is something you did once and never again? Tried to intervene during a street fight. Got shot for my troubles. When I was 14, I accidentally mistook bike chain lube for sex lube. At first, I wondered why it was blue, but that thought was almost immediately overpowered by an intense burning sensation. Ran out of toilet paper when I was 11, saw alcohol wipe cloths and thought that would work just fine. Nope, as soon as I did that first wipe it was as if the sun teleported into my asshole and I was hopping around the bathroom trying not to squeal. Mom opened the door to check on the noise and saw me jumping around with an alcohol pad between my cheeks. Keep alcohol away from your caboose. Bought a $20 lottery ticket. Lost $20. Never again. Coke. I remember feeling alive. Feeling like myself for the first time. Feeling like I was bursting at the seams with creative ideas. I was finally the person I wished I was, as creative as I wished I was, and as motivated as I wished I was. I felt like I had found the secret holy grail of success and happiness. Then I thought, oh, crap. This is why people get addicted to it. So I vowed not to do it again and went back to being depressed and unmotivated.
What made the high school legend become a legend? When I was in 11th grade, a guy a year older than me, in grade 12, saved a grade 9 girl from being abducted by her estranged father in the school parking lot. Her dad hadn't been in her life for years and had previously tried to take her from her elementary school. This being her first year in high school, I guess he tried again. The 12th grader heard her scream as her dad tried to force her into his car and he ran over and got involved, apparently punching the dad before the dad got back in his car and sped off. Guy was a legit hero at the school. Our legend was actually the gym teacher. He became a legend by getting hit by a bus, getting up, getting on the bus and asking if everyone was okay. He ended up getting fired about 5 years after I graduated because he was caught soaking raisins in vodka and then eating them over the course of the day. Never change, Mr. Lev. Our history teacher was ex-military, and he was absolutely jacked. Like this guy would bike 10 miles every morning to school, kept an ab roller in his classroom, would eat salads and beans for lunch every day, the whole shebang. Anyway, one day he gives our class a pop quiz. Jeff, the strongest, biggest guy in my class, goes up to him and asks, if I can punch you in the stomach, and make you flinch. The entire class gets a 100 on the quiz. My teacher took him up on it. He prepared himself, and Jeff absolutely drills him in the stomach. Our teacher did not flinch. We still had to take the quiz, but Jeff went down in history as the guy who punched a teacher, and the teacher went down in history as a guy you don't wanna fucking mess with. What's a subtle sign that someone is a good person but doesn't want to show it? Admonishes people for being rude to wait staff. I was at a family dinner at a pub/restaurant years ago, and my sister was very rude to the waiter because her steak was overcooked or something, really went hard on him, and my brother's new girlfriend, who always seemed a shy and quiet person, told my sister to basically stop being a bitch and that the waiters didn't cook the food, and you're embarrassing all of us, everyone's looking at us etc. From that point on, I knew she was a good sort. I had a maths teacher who used to bust my chops. He was fun, but also very temperamental. He'd be silly to a point, then tell you off when you out-sillied his silliness. I was sat opposite a quiet girl who suddenly looked really distressed. She said something to him in a whisper, and he looked down to a puddle on the floor. She'd wet herself. This was when we were 11 to 12, so it was quite a big deal. I clocked this at the same time, and he gave me this look like don't you dare. He went over to his desk, poured himself a water, then came back and was pretending to peer at her work, before stumbling and dropping it on her. He apologized and made a big scene and told her she could go and get a spare uniform from the office as it was his mistake. I really respected that. I think it showed a lot about his character and care. Guy I used to work with was such a class clown, always cracking jokes. Everybody liked him because he was so funny. It was a while before realized that his jokes were never at anybody's expense. He was kind. There was never anything mean in anything he ever said, to anybody's face or behind their back. Anyway, we're married now. What is the most depressing thing someone told you? I was told my parents died in a car crash via text while in school. It was a long walk home and I'll never forget how empty the house felt. Still to this day gives me a sick feeling in my stomach. My friend called me last week and immediately I knew something was wrong by the sound of his voice. He was calling to tell me his stepson had committed suicide. It has been an incredibly rough week and it feels awful as I feel nothing I do or say will help him and his wife. Brother, it was good to see you, bro. Me, same, let's do this some more. I found my brother dead from self-inflicted gunshot wound 2 days later in my backyard. I was bagging groceries in high school. It was Christmas Eve and folks were bustling in and out getting last-minute items for their get-togethers. I bagged the groceries for this one lady who had just regular food instead of holiday food. I placed her groceries into the cart and followed her to her car. After loading her groceries I told her to have a Merry Christmas. She responded that it was hard to have a Merry Christmas when her husband just died. Like the day before Christmas Eve he died. She broke down crying, flooding me with how heartbroken and alone she was. I was 16. I didn't know how to respond. I just sat there and listened as she unloaded. Always thought about her near the holidays and it makes me thankful for my family. What is the most disturbing thing to know? Pelicans are some of the most demonic birds in existence, if not some of the most demonic creatures. Pelicans will go into other birds' nests, shove the parents out of the nest. They will then swallow babies whole, fly back to their own nests, and regurgitate the still half-alive, partially digested babies, to their own babies for them to consume. Some pelicans are literally raised on the partially digested, living flesh of other baby birds. Polar bears are the only bear species that actively hunt and kill humans for food. There's a rhyme that everyone living where bears live needs to know, and why the rhyme is so important. If it's brown, lie down. Brown or grizzly bears will leave you alone if you play dead. Climbing up a tall tree works with adult brown bears, since they can't climb trees. If it's black, fight back. Black bears will back off when they realize you're more of a threat than they realize, but do not climb a tree to escape. Both cubs and adult black bears can climb trees. If it's white, say good night. Polar bears are not only the largest bears, but they are ambush predators. If one manages to sneak up on you, you're as good as dead. The best you can do to escape is either run and drop your clothes. Fortunately for you, they have very short attention spans and they'll stop momentarily to sniff at your clothes because it's not normal for their food to suddenly drop something like that, or start praying to whatever deity you believe or don't believe in. Cyanide poisoning is an incredibly painful way to die. Cyanide was what Jonestown consumed for mass suicide. Parents were instructed to give it to their children and convinced the crying was just fear at it. For those asking about how cyanide works, if memory serves from when I first read this and listen to the audio recordings, it feels like a massive heart attack. It may not have taken too much time, but any time greater than instant is too long to suffer before death.
What was the very first psychological trick you learned that blew your mind? If you ask someone to move over to an arbitrary different location to talk, could be 5 feet away, they are much more likely to listen to you and follow instructions. One of my tricks as an elementary school teacher. When walking through a crowd, don't look at the people in front of you. Instead, look past them where you are trying to go, and most people will make room without noticing it. I taught teenagers in a really tough London school. A colleague taught me a brilliant trick to get a kid to calm down when they were angry. Look them calmly in the eye and say, "What do you want to happen next?" Most of the time they were so caught up in emotion they hadn't thought about the consequences of their dickery. As soon as you prod them to think about consequences, most of them would calm down straight away. Stop talking. If you want to get more information out of someone, just let them speak. There are times in a conversation that things stop. Most people want to fill this themselves, but don't. Let the other person do it. This is especially useful if you think the person and their story is full of shit. Working as a waitress, if I noticed a customer was getting particularly impatient and it looked like they were going to be rude to me when I went over, when I would take the food over and before they got the chance to speak, I'd say something like, "So sorry for the wait, thanks for being so lovely about it." It seemed to catch them off guard and paint them as the nice guy in my eyes, and more often than not their expression would change from pissed off to surprised. Then they'd say something like, "Oh, no problem, it's okay," so they could keep being the nice guy and feel good about themselves, and I avoided chewing out.
If you could telepathically say something that all 7.8 billion people on Earth could hear at once, what would it be? Don't do it. Could save some lives. Could stop some petty crime. Could prevent a perfectly good wedding from happening. Who knows? Results would be interesting. A countdown, starting at a decently high number. Let's say 255. It would be in a monotone, androgynous voice, and everyone would hear it in their own language. The countdown would stop at 6. I'm watching when you touch yourself. What is the most fucked up thing you have seen? When I was about 9, my friend Jason called to say he was coming over. This was the 80s, so no cell phones. So, after he was taking way too long to get there, I called. His grandma said he just left a little bit ago. So, I waited, he still didn't show. We lived in a dangerous part of town in Section 8, and so I started to get nervous again. He was only a block away. Why would it take so long? I called Graham again and she was like, well, maybe he saw a friend on the way, check outside. So, I did. I went outside and his dead body was by the entrance to my building. His coat and shoes were gone. It seems someone murdered a little boy for his fucking stuff. I had the pleasure of discovering him and testifying at the guy's grand jury later. I didn't see the accident, but while living in Jamaica I saw a man carrying a mangled body just walking in the country. I later learned they were brothers, and worked construction together. One brother fell from a great height, and the other brother was just carrying his body, walking towards the hospital even though the brother had died on impact. He was just in a terrible sad mania. When I was in high school, the drama teacher was walking around on the catwalk high above the auditorium and she got her hair stuck in an exhaust fan. At that time her hair was almost to her knees. Her scalp was ripped off and I saw her in the hallway with towels and blood everywhere. She was in shock and shivering on the ground. The school went into lockdown and we were escorted to a different area so we didn't have to see the aftermath. Unfortunately I saw it before that happened. She was in the hospital for nearly a year recovering. Got called to the ER to help work a code. It was a man who had a bloody nose that simply would not stop bleeding. By the time they got him to the ER he had lost so much blood he was in arrest. Doing CPR on a dude who died from a bloody nose is something you'll never forget. So much blood. Car accident OMW home from work. I stopped to call 911 and got out to check on people. The guy I had checked on was holding his intestines in his lap. I don't have a clue how I was able to stay composed for his sake, telling him everything was fine. It was just a scratch, yada yada.
Tell me your glitch in the Matrix stories. When I was around 20, a few years ago, I kept having dreams about a woman with long black hair named Aurora, pronounced Aurora. They were different dreams, but for some reason, her distinct face and name always ended up in them. It got to the point where I would wake up frustrated and confused, trying to Google her name or find out how I was connected to her. After a few months she stopped showing up and I dismissed it, thinking my brain was just being a scumbag. Fast forward a few years later, Halloween 2009, I'm in the car with a friend stopped at a gas station. I'm about to pull out and merge onto a highway when I get a phone call from a random number, so I stopped the car but no one answered. There was a person behind me who grew impatient, honked at me, and then swerved in front of me instead of waiting for 2 seconds for me to move. Second they get on the highway, some silver Civic loses control of their wheel and crashes into the car that swerved in front of me. I called the cops and waited at the gas station for them to come. Turns out the drivers of both cars died. It 100% would have been me if I hadn't have got that phone call. Called it back a few hours later out of gratitude and curiosity, rang 3 times and went to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Aurora. Please leave your name and number. Never had goosebumps like that in me life. Called it again the next day, because I was that confused about the whole situation. Some woman answers, we get to talking. I tell her my entire story including the dreams I had. She tells me she doesn't know how I got her number and that she never called me as far as she remembers. Weird. Ask her if she has a Facebook to confirm if she is in fact the woman in my dreams. Check her Facebook. Holy fuck, it's her. If that's not a glitch in the matrix, then I'm just batshit crazy. And now I ask you,
what are the most suspicious coincidences in history? The British actor Anthony Hopkins, who shot to fame as Hannibal Lecter, was delighted to hear that he had landed a leading role in a film based on the book The Girl from Petrovka by George Pfeiffer. A few days after signing the contract, Hopkins traveled to London to buy a copy of the book. He tried several bookshops, but there wasn't one to be had. Waiting at Leicester Square Underground for his train home, he noticed a book apparently discarded on a bench. Incredibly, it was The Girl from Petrovka. That in itself would have been coincidence enough, but in fact it was merely the beginning of an extraordinary chain of events. 2 years later, in the middle of filming in Vienna, Hopkins was visited by George Pfeiffer, the author. Pfeiffer mentioned that he did not have a copy of his own book. He had lent the last one, containing his own annotations, to a friend who had lost it somewhere in London. With mounting astonishment, Hopkins handed Pfeiffer the book he had found. "Is this the one?" he asked, with the notes scribbled in the margins. It was the same book.
What is something a high school teacher told you, that you will never forget? I had a gym teacher that was known for being strict/rude. He actively would make kids cry on the regular. Anyway, after my dad passed away he was still super strict towards me. But one day after track practice he caught me in the hall and said, "Your dad would be so proud of you." It caught me so off guard, I actually cried. My partner had a high school teacher that would walk through the busy hallways at school shouting hot coffee while holding an empty mug. He just wanted people to get out of his way and it always worked. My English teacher in grade 6 put A and lot on 2 separate pieces of paper and taped them to opposite walls on the classroom. Then she got a student to run from A to lot while yelling with them, "A gets to other side Lu to teach us that they were separate and that a lot is incorrect." I have never forgotten and can still picture it as if it were yesterday, and it's been 12 years.